to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. This is the place where you get both a coach's and sports dietitian perspective on topics important to endurance sports, including nutrition, training, and how these impact and fit into your daily life both on and off the race course. Your host, Coach Justin, certified run and triathlon coach and owner of Tabula Rasa Racing, along with Coach Katie, a registered dietitian with a specialty in sports nutrition and owner of Fuel to Run. Here at the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast is where your journey begins. Welcome, everyone. So we are on episode 10 of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. I'm your host, Coach Justin. I'm here with Coach Katie. Today, we are doing a bit of a race recap. So we did one of these a couple episodes ago where we had some races that both of us did. Now we've kind of gotten on the other side of our A races, each of our respective A races for the year. And so we thought that we would do another race recap podcast. So Katie's A race was the Vermont City Marathon. Mine was the Jamestown Olympic Triathlon. And so let's get started. So, Katie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Yeah, I'm doing really good. I had a little rough go after my marathon where I was struggling a bit. We can talk about that, but I'm feeling much better today. I'm just hoping we have some rough weather coming in, so I'm just hoping we can make it through without having a hailstorm come through or something. Yeah. I'm doing. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. So last week was a bit of a recovery week for me, but I think I screwed it up because I'm even more sore than I was after the race. And so I could talk a little bit about that when I do my race recap and kind of how I've approached like this past week. But otherwise, mentally, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling focused. Still dealing with some physical soreness, but I joke with a couple of my other friends that I feel like I've been perpetually sore for like 10 years. And so if I weren't sore, then I think something would be off.
Great.
And just something just wouldn't feel right, you know? But that's how it goes. But feeling good and ready to transition my training in a different direction now that my triathlon season is over. But let's get started. I'm anxious to hear about how your race went, how you prepared, what were some of the highlights of your race and maybe some of the highlights of your training to prepare for the race, some of the nutrition side of it, how you fueled maybe pre and during and then post race, and how you've used some of that nutrition to recover from your race. I'm interested to hear on how things have gone. So let's start with you. So I'm going to turn it over to Katie. So here we go.
All right. Well, let's kind of, I guess, go to the week before and we can kind of go through along the way. Because we had I think it was right like a week or two before my race, we were doing that taper podcast. So I was right in my taper at the time. So it was pretty good timing. So that week before, I had really reduced my volume and my intensity and was feeling pretty good, I would say. We left for Vermont on Thursday, like before. So the race was May 25th. So we left that Thursday. And I think if I were to go back and had rescheduled my plane tickets, I would have had us leaving earlier in the morning instead of in the afternoon, because there's a time change. There's a 2-hour time change. It's 2 hours later in East Coast. So we left at, I think it was like 2 or 3 in the afternoon when we left. And then we had a layover, like Washington Dulles, and then we flew into Vermont. So by the time we get to Vermont, it's 11:45 there. So it's pretty late. And then my mom picks us up and we drive to her place. So by the time we get to sleep, it's like 12:30, maybe 1 in the morning. And then, of course, at 5:30 or 6, when the light comes, when it's light out, I wake up. And I'm all messed up because it's actually like 3 in the morning and anyway, I got back to sleep a little bit, but needless to say, it wasn't the best night of sleep. So I was optimistic, hopefully, to get a good night of sleep that next night, because they always, you always hear you have to sleep well like 2 nights before. It doesn't matter as much the night before, but it's like getting that good sleep. So I think, though, because I'd had a poor night of sleep, I was kind of anxious about it, and that maybe wasn't helpful, because then it was leading in like, oh, I have to absolutely get a great night of sleep that next night. And that's, maybe I'll talk more about that, but it wasn't super helpful. But I just did like a light run. We were hanging out in Vermont, it just kind of keeping it really easy. I think, can't remember what we did, but we were just, nothing strenuous, just like we talked about, just relaxing, taking it easy. And then that Friday night, I had all intentions to go to bed early, but again, I think the time change made it hard. So when we went to bed at 9 or 9:30 in Vermont, it's still 7:30 where I'm in Colorado. So it took me a while to fall asleep. And then again, had some issues kind of staying asleep and sleeping in. Even though I have a sleep mask, I'm doing everything right. I do like a magnesium supplement that helps a little bit with sleep. I have a couple things I do. I took a sleepy tea, like all my sort of usual routine. And it wasn't the worst night, but it wasn't the best night, which was a little bit disappointing. I even tried to take a little bit of a nap. But I also had family in town. So we were race packet pickup, family in town. I think one thing, though, that might have been an aspect to my race that, we'll talk about a little bit maybe after, but I do want to mention, is I was in the invited runner program for the Vermont City Marathon. So it was challenging because there was almost like a level of expectation beyond my own expectations for myself, because I did this because first of all, it was nice. I got a free race entry. I didn't really get like a ton of other bonuses for it, but because I think my time, with the faster the runner, the more they kind of offer. But I did have all my stuff on the course. So I had the table with all my bottles on the course. That was a bonus. So that's kind of why I did it. Cause I'm like, oh, great. I'm going to be able to really optimize my nutrition, and I get this free race entry, and I've done this marathon 3 times before, and I'll be able to kind of see how I compare, although the race course was a little different. But anyways, they had like this whole race, like prep, like what do they call it? I can't remember, but it's like a meeting that they hold for the invited runners or elite runners the day before the race, where they talk about rules and things to keep in mind, and, specific things that maybe apply to us because we're invited versus somebody else running the course, and, just specific things to keep in mind. And I think that kind of made me nervous, because I'm like, oh man, like there's all these other people here that are doing this, and I don't know, like just a little bit of extra nerves there. And then we go home, and the few days before I was carbo loading. So sometimes I'll record all my food and fuel in an app, but since I've done this so many times, I kind of know basically what I'm eating and kind of how many carbs are in the meals. So sort of Thursday while we were traveling, I just brought a lot of carby snacks and was eating lots of carbs. But then Friday, Saturday, I really carb load. So we follow a gluten-free diet because my son has celiac disease. So it's like gluten-free bagels that they have a really great gluten-free bakery where my mom is. I did bagels, like a sandwich with bread, but like lots of like rice. I think we had risotto the Friday night. But I can't remember everything. I should have probably wrote down exactly what I did, but just a lot of like basically high carb, not super high fiber food. I think we had pancakes for breakfast one day, but anyway, and bagels, and just trying to get the carbs in, risotto or rice for dinner. A little bit of protein, but reducing my intake I didn't eat a ton of veggies. I ate some fruit, but not a ton of veggies, not a ton of high fiber foods, because I try to avoid having bathroom issues during the race if I can. And so I'm doing that. So it's just a lot of carb an increase in carb. Usually I'll try to hit 300 to 400 grams in those 2 days. And that's a little bit lower than the high end of what they recommend. But I just find because I'm reducing my volume and my intensity and I'm kind of eating more carbs in general that week, or just I'm kind of paying more attention to carbs, I'm just naturally sort of replenishing my glycogen and optimizing that.
Mhm.
So I don't necessarily go crazy all the like high levels of carb, because that really is uncomfortable to me. It's hard to do.
Yeah.
So I just kind of been mindful of it all week. And then I really add a lot more carbs those 2 days. And I think the night before we had pasta, gluten-free pasta. So a very common thing I eat before my long runs and something I'm very used to. I think maybe a little bit of chicken or something with that, but I just ate a pretty big bowl of pasta, a little bit of protein, and tried to go to bed early and fell asleep at like 9:30, but woke up at like around midnight or 12:30. So that's where that's where my struggles with the sleep really got to me. I woke up almost like in a panic, like hard to describe, but just I don't know if anyone's had that happen where they wake up and they're just kind of like panic. That's
Mhm.
the state I was in, and it sucked because I was starting to get like, oh, I need to get back to sleep. I need to get sleep, and then it was snowballed. And I tried all
Yeah.
these strategies I know to try to get back to sleep, like taking my mind off of it, like just doing little things like counting, you know what I mean? Those little,
Yeah.
I think I was like trying to count. I was trying to get like think about something relaxing like the beach. I was trying to do all these things and my mind just would not, it just kept cycling back to the race, and I just could not get back to sleep. So at some point I just had to give up and just like be, this is what it's going to be, right? And so at like 4:30 or 5, I just got up and got ready, and I actually felt pretty good. But the unfortunate thing is, normally that wouldn't be a big deal because that's not the most important night. But the unfortunate thing is, like, I didn't sleep fantastic
Yeah.
the 2 nights before. So I don't like to make excuses for things, but I definitely think that might have had some impact on the way I was perceiving my effort during the marathon, because we do know that when you don't sleep well, especially a few nights, when your sleep has been hindered for, a couple nights in a row or more, we do have a higher level of like that perceived, like we perceive the exertion much more than we would if we're well rested. So, that's something to think about. But I woke up, I had a bagel, a gluten-free bagel with peanut butter and a banana, I believe, and a little bit of coffee and some electrolyte drink. And by the way, I've been drinking all through the time we were traveling. I think even the day before, I've been just sort of drinking some additional electrolytes in my water. So I use LMNT, and I add that to my water. And so I'm paying attention to electrolytes. I sort of front load them a little bit, like the days that leading up. I don't go crazy, but I'm not running as much. So I'm just adding it little bits to my water the days leading up, and then I'll have a little bit in the morning. And I have a pre-workout drink that also has a little caffeine. So I drink a little bit of coffee, but then I had this pre-workout drink that I've tried a few times before and I like. I don't want to mention it. I don't really have any affiliation with this company, but it's just almost like a vasodilator, almost like similar to beetroot, powder.
Okay.
It kind of helps give me energy, and it just kind of helps that, blood flow. So I've noticed it really helps. I almost think I should have actually added another bit of that midway through the race. Like I wish, going back, I'm like, oh, I should have had one of my bottles contain some of that, because that would have been,
Yeah.
I think, really helpful for me. But, in retrospect, maybe that's something to think about next time. But so we get to the race. I do a little, so I go to the bathroom. At this point, the porta potties there's not a big line. And then I do like a little light 5-minute jog. And so this is kind of one of the things with marathons is I don't believe everybody should like warm up. Like if somebody's just doing a marathon for the first time, or they're maybe depending on their time goal, like sometimes, you have to always weigh the cost and benefit of doing any sort of warm up, because the more you warm up before the marathon, the more you're depleting your body a little bit of glycogen. So I just literally ran like a very slow 5-minute jog just to get my body warm and just kind of get the blood flowing a little bit. So it wasn't anything major. It was just a little bit. I don't ever recommend doing more than 10 minutes of warm up. So some people will do like light jogging, and I thought they were going to let us do strides from the start, because they had mentioned that in the race, like, little stride outs. And I was just going to do a few of those just to get my legs going, but they didn't. So that was one of the things that was kind of lacking in the beginning. But then it's like, so the race starts at 7:15 and the invited runners have to be there at 7:05. And I'm like, I just want to go. I have to go to the bathroom one more time. So I get to the porter potties and there's a huge line, and it's like 6:50, 6:55. And I'm waiting in this line, and I just get to this point. It's like close to 7:05. And I'm like, I don't want to not make it to the start, because I'm supposed to be starting up front, right? So I had to make this decision, like, I guess I'm not going to be able to go to the bathroom. Well, I get to the start, and one of the other girls is like, I didn't have a chance to pee. The porta potty lines were long. So we ran over to this dumpster and literally peed behind it. Because I'm like, I don't know what to do. I don't have to pee my pants.
Yeah.
But I think the problem was it didn't allow me to, like, that one last opportunity to just get everything out. And that's one of my criticisms. I loved the race, and I've done it before, obviously, but that was kind of one of my criticisms, is like, oh my gosh, you're just like so many times when we race. But because I had that extra stress of having to get there at that certain time, it was hard. And so I don't know how much of an influence it had. Like, if I'd had this I think if I'd had this opportunity to go to the bathroom, it would have helped me not have it to make a pit stop. So that's the other thing I had to do, but we'll get to that. So we start, so 7:15, we don't even get to do the stride outs. It's like, whatever, I'll warm into it. And the wheelchair race starts. And then I think like 5 minutes later we start. And at this time, I mean, I'm feeling calm. I'm like ready. I'm like, I know I haven't slept that well, but I felt pretty good. I'm just optimistic, because I know I put so much into my training. I had basically started my training back in February, January a little bit, and then February, just doing some base training, building. Kind of took a little bit off in March to do a half marathon, and then I kind of got sick with the GI bug. So I had a couple weeks there that were lower mileage. And then I ramped up my mileage and hit some high mileage of like 75 miles a week for a few weeks. And really just a block of like 4 or 5 weeks where I was at least 65 to 75. So that's a big training. That's a lot. I was really trying to see how much I could do in preparation. And so I put a lot of work into this marathon, right? And I'm like, well, I know I'm prepared. Put a lot of work in. Like, I've done everything right. There's always risk when you're doing that kind of thing, when you're pushing yourself to see how far you can take it and how much you can train. But then I get to, so I'm at the start, I'm confident I put in the training, right? But I'm worried about my sleep. So we start the race, and I felt pretty good. I was going for my A time, which would have been like a 2:55, 2:56 if everything had been perfect. That would be, I think I was capable of that time, have everything come together perfectly. So I was running at a pace, I think, averaging probably around 6:35, 6:40 maybe, depending. There was a few hills there. Maybe a slight bit faster on some of the downhill portions, but I'm like, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to see what I can do. I know that's always risky, because you kind of run into slowing down the second half, but I felt pretty good. I think the one thing I noticed right off the bat was it was as if the time was slower than I'm used to. Like, I'm used to doing a marathon and being like feeling good and kind of just being in it and kind of present in it and watching things around me and feeling pretty good and having like the miles click by what I perceive as pretty quickly, and having the first several miles be like, oh my gosh, it's already mile 7, like just this kind of perceived, easy. Like the time's going by fairly fast. And the one thing I noticed right away was the time seemed to be going slowly. Like I'm like, oh, it's only mile 3 or it's only mile 4.
Yeah.
And that was one of the first things I was like, oh man, I'm only still have so much to go. And I'm already kind of thinking to myself, like, oh wow, we're only here. Like, so that wasn't a great sign, but I'm like, well, maybe I know I'm tired. Hopefully I'll just get into it. But yeah, that was one of the things I noticed early on. So there was like 5 different times throughout the race where there was a bottle on the course, and I decorated my bottle with lots of colorful duct tape and things so I would know. Mm-hmm. And so I had that very planned out. I can't remember what each bottle had. Most of the bottles, except for one, had some sort of carbohydrate drink mix. So I used the Morton high carb drink mix and then the Scratch Labs high carb drink mix. And not in each one. Each one had about half the drink mix in it because it's a lot of carb, and I put an additional electrolyte. So that, I mean, again, no affiliation to either of those companies. That's just what I use. Oh, right before the race started, I did take a UCAN gel. And then I had taped onto the bottles gels, and I also had some with me just in case I missed a bottle. So I had a couple gels with me just in case. And I knew on the course they were going to have the untapped maple syrup gels, and that is the kind I love. So I use maple syrup gels and UCAN mostly, and then the high carb drink. That's kind of the way I do it because I enjoy those gels. I'm picky. I don't like the consistency of a lot of gels, so those just work. Yeah. I get that one that's like a burst of energy, and then the UCAN's kind of a more slow digesting carb. So I got most of the bottles. I think the problem was I had a 500 milliliter bottles, and it was just hard. Like I'm trying to drink it, and it's like I'm trying to get most of it in, but I'm holding on to it for a while trying to get it, which was great. I'm so glad I had that option to be able to like get the bottle and hold on to it. And then when I would get to like a trash or somewhere where I knew they were going to be able to see it and pick it up, I would discard it. Unfortunately, that's kind of a waste, I guess. But so yeah, I was doing that. I was taking, I think I had another UCAN gel. Gosh, maybe about 30 minutes in, and then probably another hour or so in, I had a maple syrup. So I kind of alternated. I think I did a maple syrup gel, but then I was like, this maple syrup gel is really helping me feel better. So I did a caffeinated gel at like an hour 30, and then another caffeinated gel around 2 hours, or I might have done a UCAN and then another caffeinated gel, because that was like, that caffeine was like, okay, that's helping me be able to overcome this fatigue. I kind of think I probably could have had more of the caffeinated stuff to help, but again, or that pre-workout drink mix to kind of give me that energy that I needed. But it's okay. I think I'm always thinking about what I could do better next time. But that's kind of how I was feeling throughout. I would say probably about halfway through, it was getting tougher. Like I was struggling a little bit more, and I hit that time pretty good. Like it would have been good to get, I think it was a 127.40 or a 127.45. So I would have hit that 120 or 256 goal if I just stuck to that pace. But it did start to get harder. Like I was noticing, this is becoming more of a struggle. I'm just trying to hang in there. And then at mile 16 or 17-ish, I'm like, I had to go to the bathroom, like if it was just peeing, I would have peed my pants. Like, I don't care about that, but it was like,
yeah.
And I don't want it to be an emergency. I'm not making money, like a lot of money. Like I might have gotten a little bit just, of prize money, but it wasn't much. I'm not making $100,000. It's not the Boston Marathon, and I'm not winning it. Like, I'm not taking that risk. I'm sorry. Like, I'm not going to be 18 miles of run and having an accident and then having to run with, poop going down my leg. So I had to make this decision, and I hopped into the porta potty really quick, as fast as I could go. It was like 30 seconds, and felt better. And I think that helped me, because then I was like, okay, I don't have to worry about that anymore. I think the thought and the worry of that gut stuff was slowing me down. So I was able to go. And then I kind of had another like second wind, and there was another big hill kind of around mile 19 or 20. And I'm like, I got 6 miles, and I just like basically hung on, and my pace slowed a bit, but I was just hanging on those last 6 miles. And I think just the knowledge that I was so close to my PR at the end, I was pushing it. I was, you get that, you're like, you're just in pain, and you're just like, I've got to do this. Like, I'm just going to go. My feet were starting to cramp up. It was one of those situations, which is kind of similar to the New York City Marathon that I had, where I'm starting to cramp, and it's like, I'm just hanging on. And if I try to go any faster, I could totally have a full, like my whole foot could have cramped up, and I wouldn't have been able to go anymore. So you're just trying to, hedge your bets. Like, I'm just going to go. And then at the finish line, there's this section where it's grass, and it just been so rainy that the grass was like, it was like running on I don't know, like it was just squishy, sloshy grass. You know what I mean? And it's like, I'm like, I mean, my family later told me there's several runners they watched like get to that point and just like fall, or like unable to run because it was so squishy, squashy, and like not very conducive to a good finish, like sprint. Yeah. You know what I mean? If it hadn't been that, if they decided to do it on the rest of the finish on the bike path, I think I would have been able to get just a touch under 2:59. But that grass like slowed me down, and it was like maybe 100 yards. It was a pretty good amount of grass, right? So I'm like trying to run, and it's like, I'm like, I just don't want to fall over, and I don't want to get a cramp. But I think I could have pushed it a little harder at the finish had I had a better surface, and I might have been able to save like 2 seconds. I don't know. It's okay, but it was the exact same time, that 2:59:02. That's the chip time that I had back in 2010, so 15 years ago. So you can, I think that's a good accomplishment. Yeah, I didn't get my A goal, but I did get the PR, but man, I was right there, right? It's like, that was my PR from 15 years ago, right? So I'm pretty happy with that. I do think the bathroom break and maybe the sleep was my biggest. The lack of bathroom break, the lack of being able to go to the bathroom and then having to use the porta potty, and then the sleep was probably my downfalls. If I'd had those two, I probably could have done, I think, maybe 2:58 or faster. But I'm happy with that. That's the thing with the marathon, is we have so many variables. There's so many things that have to come together, and I've been so lucky. The weather was wonderful. It was like 40s and 50s. It was perfect. No rain. It was sunny kind of towards the end, but it was beautiful. So I can't complain about weather. I have no other things I can complain about. It was otherwise just a really perfect day. So, that's a thing. And I think sometimes finishing that, I've had 3 marathons in the past that I've run in the past like 8 or 9 months. Like, I've been really pushing it hard with the marathon. And so now I really have to take a break. It's just so hard also on the body to just continuously do that, training and that volume and that intensity. So my recovery hasn't, as I've talked with Justin about this a bit, but the recovery was a bit rough. Like, I felt pretty good the first week. We were in Maine. So you're asking about my post marathon recovery eating. I have to like admit, like, I did eat right away after the marathon. I tried to get some food in and recover a bit, and some protein. But you just run a marathon, you kind of have a little bit of leeway. Like, we went and got maple creamy, like real maple creamies, and I put extra maple syrup. You can tell how much I love maple syrup because I've now consumed it throughout my race, and I'm now going after the race to get more maple. I could be like an advocate for Vermont maple syrup. Anyway, so that I wasn't sick of it at this point. And I think, I ate, but we went to Maine for a few days. So I did have a good fair share of Maine lobsters, and, but I wasn't, I was so diligent about my nutrition, like the days leading up, the months, I don't drink very much alcohol. at all. I think maybe in that course of my training, I could probably count on my one hand how many times I'd had it, like maybe 4 or 5 times if I had any alcohol. I don't drink very much occasionally. So I did have like maybe a beer or so. Like I don't drink very much all at once, but that's kind of the time I'm like, I've been so diligent about my fueling, about thinking about what I'm eating. I'm thinking about all of these aspects, what I'm going to eat during my training, that I think the nice part about that, and I knew I wasn't going to try to then run another marathon in, 6 weeks or something crazy like that. So I just like it's the time for me to kind of let go of all of that worrying.
Yeah.
And, I'm not training. My body's going to recover. I'm not like going crazy and partying and drinking a bunch of alcohol or doing something like totally off the deep end. I'm just not worrying about those aspects that I've spent so much time not obsessing over, but it definitely takes a level close to obsession. In order to really maximize your performance, you have to kind of be diligent about your nutrition and recovery and all those things. And it's just nice to let that go a little bit. So I didn't, pay that much attention to it. I just kind of ate when I felt like it. We went out to eat because we were in Maine, and it was wonderful. And I think I might have ran like 1 mile on the beach and did a little bit of running. And then the next week, the day we left to come home, I got very achy, and then I had the some like chills at night. It was like a weird symptom that I started getting, and I didn't feel good the next day, so I didn't run. And then I started to feel a little better. And then by Saturday afternoon, I was not feeling good again. And I had these. So you mentioned, Justin, like you feel achy all the time. Like when I'm feeling achy and my joints are in pain, like it's alarming to me. And this is kind of what I was experiencing, this really like some mild fever over the weekend. And just, I tried going running, and I'm like, this isn't going well. Like it's more of a walk run.
Right.
I'm like, I want to just get some movement, but I'm not going to push my body. And it's just this achiness. I actually went to the urgent care. Probably shouldn't have. I guess I was just overly cautious, and they couldn't find anything wrong with me. But I think I might have had a virus that maybe was one that wasn't one of the typical viruses they test. I'm not sure. And there is such a thing as like viral arthritis, I guess. And, the achiness can be a symptom. I was freaking out that I had some sort of RA or like something, like I had tripped or something. But luckily by this last weekend, it did kind of go away. I kind of wonder too, if it's just, you put your body through so much when you're training. I think sometimes our body has these little ways of slowing us down if we're listening. And I think that might have also been part of it, is just like, no, it's like almost my body is kind of like, no, you need another like week, like or so of taking it easy. Right. So I just started getting back into it, but I'm going to take it easy for a bit. And I don't have any huge races on my calendar for a while. So it's kind of nice. It's like, okay, I need to take a step back, focus on strength. I'm going to focus on speed. I might do some 1 mile, like fast races, just focus on speed and strength for a bit, and kind of reevaluate if I want to go again for another marathon PR, or just even training like that for another marathon, or if I want to focus on something else like a half marathon. But I'm still, I haven't jumped this time. I'm not jumping into anything for a while. I'm giving myself some time. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I covered, if you have any things you wanted to ask.
Did you place? I could have swore that I remembered you telling me that you. Don't forget that part.
I just totally, I was so focused on my time in my head, I kind of forget that. Yes, I did. I was the first female masters runner. So I got a little plaque, and I was 4th woman overall, which is pretty good. I think, I don't know how many, I can't remember how many people were in the race, but it was like 85 out of for total out of men and women out of 1,500 or something. So I was pretty happy. Yeah, that's pretty good. And then I got an email yesterday. This is funny. From the race, the Vermont City Marathon like race director, that's like, you've qualified for the Abbott Marathon Majors World Championship or something like that in Cape Town, South Africa, like next year.
Wow.
And they're like, well, I don't know about that. That's pretty out of that's pretty far away. Pretty, yeah, but that was interesting. I wasn't expecting that. So I don't know that's a pretty far distance. And that
is that the Abbott? Is that one of the 5 stars? So
yeah,
it's
like
the world champion, the all the championship races. So there's like Tokyo, there's London.
Yeah,
and,
I didn't realize
Boston. So this
yeah,
is one of the stars.
No, I think it's just its own thing. It's like a championship.
Oh, okay.
So it's not even one of the stars. It's just like I didn't know that this even existed, right? I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I didn't even know. Yeah, they have like this, I think it's like 7 of them now, the majors. There's Boston, New York, Chicago, London, Berlin, Tokyo, and then I think Sydney. So I thought about that. I'm like, well, that would be cool to get that, but I think some of those are very hard to get into. Like the London marathon, I've heard is like harder to get into. So, thought about that as a goal eventually. But this would be a separate thing, I think, like a whole championship that's just separate from like the whole world. So obviously you have to qualify, but I wish I was a little bit of a different location because I'm not sure. I was like, oh, like it could have been a little closer to home. I don't know, but I don't know if I'll do it. I just thought that was kind of cool.
Just turn it into a racecation. So
yeah, I know, right?
Instead of
it wasn't one of the
taking
locations
a family vacation. Yeah.
I was kind of hoping it was somewhere I'd actually like been thinking I wanted to go to. Not that I don't like the idea of going to South Africa. It just wasn't ever something I was like, oh yeah, that's a destination I absolutely have to go to. So
yeah,
it's okay. I mean, I'm not knocking South Africa at all. It's probably like a great and very interesting place to go, but it's I need to think about that, and I'm not sure my husband was really excited about that location either. He's kind of like, oh great, now what are like and the costs, there's obviously costs to it. It's not like free. They don't invite you and then pay for everything. So anyway, that was interesting. But yeah, I did, those are my kind of where I placed. And so and some of the I think I don't know. I think that's pretty much it for that plate. I don't think there's anything else.
So for some of the listeners who may not be familiar, like some of the classifications within marathons or in the running community, explain what the Masters division is.
Yeah, Masters division is everybody over 40. So I think the unfortunate thing about that is that obviously, like the older you get, the less likely you're going to be able to place well in a Masters division because it kind of captures. Of course, they sometimes have Grandmasters, which I can't remember if that's 60 but there's like the Masters, and then some races will do like a Grandmasters because it's like, okay, we're acknowledging that over 60, and then they have age graded, so there is a way you can plug in your age graded results, which kind of shows you like where you would place if you were younger, and that's kind of complicated. But that is the Masters categories, everything over
40 and above.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. So it's that's kind of the nice thing, I guess, about getting to your 40s is you enter like a new category. And it's great until you hit like, I don't know, 50. And then you're like, well, now I'm never going to, now I'm competing against people. And obviously in your 40s, there's still a lot of potential to run quite fast, but we do slow down, unfortunately, as we age. So,
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, congratulations. That is awesome. So it's fourth overall women and first Masters, first female Masters. So congratulations. All the hard work paid off. Just goes to show that, sometimes when we have all these hurdles and things pre-race, it it's not like it doesn't dictate how the race is going to go. So was it ideal, and was it, consistent with kind of how you envisioned it going? No. Did it impact your race? Maybe, but
Mhm.
you still performed exceptionally well. And so sometimes when, athletes don't have, the first few days don't go prior to the race, don't go like they would hope them to go, they kind of discount it and just say, oh,
Mhm.
well, the past few days have been really, really crappy. So now this is just going to be a training event, which is horrible. I mean, it's ridiculous. So it's, just
Yeah, it almost
because, the few days didn't go kind of like how you would hope that they would go, doesn't mean that you're not going to perform.
right.
So,
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And people, I mean, I've heard stories of like Elliot Kipchoge, like the goat, of
mhm,
marathon running, and he saying like before that 2 hour attempt, and I don't know if this is true. I just kind of heard this through maybe an article or something. He'd only got like a couple hours sleep the night before that attempt because again, that's a lot of pressure. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Or even if he'd only slept, 4 hours, that wouldn't have been very much. But because he knows of his capability and that he's had so much I don't know, faith in himself.
mhm,
He didn't say, "Hey, I'm gonna this whole thing's a wash. I'm not even gonna do it." Right? He went ahead and
right.
did it and did quite well. So it's keeping that in mind, and I think we can really get in our heads sometimes. And if you tell yourself, like for me, it was hard. That was what I was focusing on. Like, no, I'm gonna be just fine. I put in the work, and that self talk when I was
Yeah,
struggling, especially that morning, knowing I wasn't gonna get the sleep I wanted. I had to really focus on that positive self talk of like, yes, this is going to be fine. I'm going to do fine. I put so much work. I can't undo all that hard work in just a few nights of poor sleep. Like, I know
right.
that might affect it a little bit, but yeah, it's not going to totally derail. And so I think that happens so commonly, especially when we're doing something like a marathon. It's just it's hard not to think about that daunting task or an Ironman. It's just such a long race that I think there can be a lot of that like anxiety ahead of time, even when you do everything
Mhm,
right, to like minimize that and just not letting that be an excuse to just take it easy or,
yeah,
not do it. To really go for it. And then, you make that decision. Had I been halfway through and I was really struggling, like this isn't going to be my day, this is just not, working, I might have made that decision potentially to slow down and run the second half easy and then maybe sign up for another one, although I wasn't really wanting to do that at that point because I'd done so many. But
right.
um, you know, I would say for most people, yeah, I'm going into it like I put the work in, I'm gonna do great, and that mindset that way, even if things haven't been the week before,
Mhm,
haven't been exactly the way you wanted them to be. And then if you are in the middle of it and things just aren't working out, then you can make that decision at that time. But don't go into it being like, yeah, this is just going to be a wash. Like I'm just going to run it, or I'm not even going to show up. That's not worth
right.
it. Don't do that. So
Yeah.
unless something really bad happens, I suppose. But for the most part, yeah, I would love to hear. Now we've been talking about my race for like the past 40 minutes or something, but I'd love to hear more about your Olympic distance race. I know you've been really training for that quite a bit. So, yeah.
Yeah, so everything that I've done up till now for this year has been kind of focused on this particular race. And even though I had a few smaller races that I performed well in, this one was kind of my A. So this is what my training plan was built for, and how I structured it was built for this. So going into it, so I just brought up Training Peaks here. I had a very similar taper than what I've had for the previous couple like sprint races that I've done. It looks like I had planned about 8.5 hours of training. Um, it What happened was like 2 weeks before race, I had some flare up in my Achilles, and so it was kind of flared up in both feet. So I had to make a bit of an adjustment to the plan, and I think it was like the week before my taper, so it was 2 weeks before race day, I removed running from the plan and inserted in some ellipticals, just to see if that would help, at least keep the stride work going and remove the impact. But it looks like even the elliptical is kind of a little bit discomfort, and I think it's just the dorsiflexion of the foot is what's really bringing it. And I know what's causing it is I have really, really tight calf muscles, and so that tension over time, it just flares up the Achilles. It's something that I've been dealing with, for probably a couple years now, actually. So I've been able to manage it pretty well, but training has been going well, and so I wasn't going to just discount, uh, my expectations for the race simply because it was flared up. I was like, look, I've done a lot of work for this race, and is this ideal? No, it's not. But you know, like you said, it can't erase months and months of hard work if you just have to adjust the plan, for 2 weeks leading up to race day. And I don't like to adjust plans, especially my own. And so, it was more of a mental thing and more of a pride thing, really. It's just like, hey, I was really hoping to, push forward with this. But now I know that if I keep pushing, it's going to affect my race day. And so I'd rather kind of back off now, rather than dig a deeper hole, and have it really affect my race. So I made that slight adjustment. I took my leg strength conditioning out of my plan, in order to really kind of like rest those legs, and not do anything to make the Achilles worse. But I was still riding and still swimming. I worked really, really hard on my swim build. And so my race prep swim, I didn't think that this race was going to be wetsuit legal, when I signed up for it. But then, I started thinking, I was like, man, maybe it is going to be wetsuit legal. And so as I got closer, I was monitoring water temperatures, for the river, and it turned out like it was kind of like within range. So it was wetsuit legal. So my race prep swim, that week was with my wetsuit in the pool. So it was like, you know, for the Olympic, it's a 1,500 meter swim. So my race prep swim is 2 by 1,500s. And, I did that in the pool with the wetsuit just to kind of see, how the arms, my shoulders were going to hold up for that kind of duration. They held up fine. It was a really big confidence boost coming out of that swim, knowing that I could swim 2 by 1,500. So I knew, I was like, well, this definitely means that I can swim just 1,500 open water and be perfectly fine and not have it take too much out of me. It would have been a different story if I would have finished like the 2 by 15s and, really kind of got out of the pool just gassed and just really kind of not in a good place. Then that would have had some seeds of doubt in my mind. But luckily, it worked. And, it wasn't the first time I had done the 2 by 1,500s. And so, but it felt good. And so leading into the race, what we ended up doing, I live about an hour and 20 minutes away from the race venue. It's in Williamsburg, Virginia. So it was on the other side of Williamsburg and closer to the historic district. And I live outside of Richmond. And it was my grandmother's 95th birthday that weekend. And my mom had drove into town from Tennessee, from Georgia, and they were having her birthday party on Saturday, and this was a Sunday race. And so what we did was we found a hotel, a fairly inexpensive hotel that was not too far away from the race venue, and stayed there rather than driving all the way down, because they live not too far from the race either. So we would have had to have drove down Saturday, gone back home, and then turn right around and come back the next day for a super early race. This race was going to start at like 7:30,
Wow. Yeah.
like 7 or 7:30, and that's a really early start when you have an hour and 20 minutes just in drive time, and then you have packet pickup, all that kind of stuff that you have to deal with, and setting up your transition. So it's a lot of logistics. So I'm thankful that we were able to just spend the night and be fairly close, and that way I could enjoy my grandmother's birthday and didn't feel pressured to get home in order to rest. For the taper week for my meal plan, I checked with you and made an adjustment kind of like midweek and changed the dinner to pastas. So I just had I just made a kind of a veggie heavy, uh, not necessarily veggie heavy. It had some carrots and stuff like that in it, and it was just a nice bolognese sauce with some pasta. So we ate those for dinner to try and do a little bit of a carb load. Um, I think I do pretty well, and you can correct me if I'm wrong with my carb intake. I love carbs, so um, my my thought is if you are pretty consistent and persistent with getting in your carbs as recovery for training sessions, how important is the carb load prior to race day if you're coming into it with glycogen stores that are pretty well stocked?
Yeah, I think that's always one of the arguments to doing a full on like really heavy carb load is like, first of all, if you're already doing a really good job with carbs post workouts and recovery, you're probably not coming in even into your taper like super depleted. But one of the arguments, especially if you're doing like a 2 or 3 week taper, is you're just running less. So as long as you don't drastically decrease your carbohydrate intake, because your volume is now decreasing and maybe you're still eating a certain amount of carb, like that will pretty much cover you to have a pretty good amount of glycogen. So the carb loading at that point is only to sort of do whatever you can to maximize that to push the limit. But I don't, I mean, I'm not sure. I think the only time that that's really maybe going to be beneficial to do that is when the race is 3 hours or more. I mean, I was doing it because I'm doing a marathon. It's right at that limit, but like maybe doing more of a carb load if it's an Ironman or something where you're really going to be out there for hours and hours. But everybody, even there's arguments to that. The data sort of does suggest doing some carb load before it can help, but I think it might depend on your taper too. Like for you were reducing the volume and not doing as much leading into it, and you were still eating a good amount of carb, and then you ate some extra. You didn't you didn't do like a full-on carb load, but you did eat some extra the days kind of leading up with the pastas and things like that. So I don't know. I mean, I think that could be the argument right there, and it really depends on how you feel. Like some people do carb load. I mean, you kind of have to be used to it first of all, but it can kind of leave you feeling really bloated and almost tired, right? So and it's probably not the best thing for health. If we're trying to optimize our health, I know it's just a temporary thing, but I've seen what happens on my glucose data when I carb load, and it's not very good. Let's just put that. My glucose values are high.
I've never really done I've never done like a seriously structured carb load. I may increase carbohydrates a little bit, and may do kind of like the pasta dinners or whatever, but nothing like structured where I'm trying to take in that many.
I mean, it might be worth an experiment if you're willing to do it. Again, not on an A race, but maybe on in the future if you're like, hey, I just kind of want to see, and then you can. I wouldn't go the highest end of I would maybe try like 6 to 8 grams per kilogram, or on the lower end of it, versus like I think the high end is like 12 grams per kilogram per day, and that's a lot. I mean, if you calculate that, you'll be like astonished. But yeah, you could try it, but I think everybody's a little individual, and you kind of have to do what works. And if hey, I feel pretty good going into it without doing that, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that for the reason I stated. So
yeah, The one thing that I did do is because I expected this race to be a hot and humid race. It's historically been that way. Um, I've never personally done this particular race. There is a version of this race that's held later in the year by the same race company. So it's done by Kinetic Multisports, and they called it the Patriot. I have done the Patriot. So it's a very similar course. I don't think it's the exact same course, but I think it's similar. But I did have one of my athletes do this race a couple years ago. So I kind of, and I'm from that area. So I know what Williamsburg is like in June. And it's usually hot, humid, sticky, and just generally unpleasant. And that's just standing still. It's just like standing out there at the race venue. You're not doing anything. So I could only imagine what it was going to be like. So I did start to preload some electrolytes. So 2 days before, I drank one bottle of electrolyte, and then the day before, I drank 2 bottles of electrolyte. I use, and I, again, just like Katie, I don't have any affiliation with the company, but I use Scratch, and so I just used just my normal bottles. Is 2 scoops. And then, no, it was 1 scoop. I think I just used 1 scoop and just preloading a little bit, knowing that I was going to be drinking it during the race as well. But I just wanted to kind of top things off just a little bit. So getting there to race morning, everything was worked out well. My dinner the night before was a nice pasta from a local restaurant. It could have been better, but it served its purpose. And so we got to the race venue, which is about 15 minutes away, and it's kind of misting rain. And we kind of knew that there was a possibility of rain. I don't mind racing in the rain. I actually feel like I do better in the rain. Just historically, I've done pretty well in wet conditions. And so I was putting together my transition. I got there a little bit later than what I really wanted to. So I was kind of feeling a little rushed and a little hectic. I am racing under Team Zoot this year. So we had a dedicated rack in transition, which is super nice. And so, I got my spot. And I was standing in line for the Porta Johns, and there was a crack of lightning and thunder. And so that automatically triggered a 20-minute delay in the start of the race. And so that kind of I was kind of thankful to a certain extent because it alleviated some of the pressure of like, oh, I still haven't warmed up yet. Because I have this whole like pre-swim routine that I do to try and loosen up my shoulders. And I knew that was going to be super important, especially since I was swimming in the wetsuit. And so that was nice to have that little extra. But what it ended up doing is, which is really unfortunate, the support crew for the swim were all Norfolk lifeguards. And they had to be in their stands at a particular time, for them to patrol the beach down in Norfolk. So they did not have enough time for us to be able to swim a full 1,500 and to have a sprint swim 750. And so, unfortunately, they cut my swim from 1,500 down to a 750. And I think they actually nixed the sprint swim altogether. I just don't think that they had enough time to do it.
That's unfortunate.
I was really disappointed because I trained really hard in the water. But
you had done that 1,500 thing, and you're like, oh,
I had planned my progression to where I was peaking right where I needed to be, and I felt really well trained for it. But this is kind of the deal that you have to that you can have to manage, when you sign up for these types of events. So, swims can get shortened, swims can get canceled, all kinds of stuff can happen. This year, it seems to be pretty prevalent in these long course races with Ironman this year, where they've had to, shorten races themselves, shorten swims, cancel swims. I was involved with Ironman Chattanooga 70.3, where the swim was canceled altogether. So, it's frustrating when
Yeah.
you work really hard at a particular discipline and not being able to see that fitness on race day.
Yeah, I actually
And
always like wasn't
the
great
reason
with the
that I'm talking
swims.
about this is that,
Yeah. I would
yeah,
always like this.
yeah. So
I remember
I'll
having this
come back to this on why.
yeah,
Yeah. Um, so I swam the 750 and had a fantastic swim. Um, it wasn't as fast as the 750 that I swam just a few weeks earlier at the Smith Mountain Lake. But this one had current to deal with, and there was a segment where you were swimming against the current. It's a tidal river, so you're swimming it with the tide for a little bit, and then against the tide coming back in. So, but
I think that would
when
definitely
you
slow
when
it
you
down quite a bit.
yeah, when you control for the not swimming exactly 750. So if you look at the pace that I swam in that race versus the pace that I swam in this one, I think this one was actually faster. So I swam a faster pace, but a slower time, which makes sense. But I feel like I swam at a fairly a clean race. So then I got out of the water. It's a long run back up to transition. In my last race, I walked it. This one I did not. So I just walked the beach segment because I don't feel like burning off that much energy trying to run through sand, which is ridiculous. So not worth the effort. Got to hard ground and then jogged into transition. Had a fairly decent, I think, transition. I didn't linger. I was pretty efficient and got out on the bike. For this race, I put on some new race tires. It has been a hot minute since I've replaced my tires. And so, I was lucky enough to find some race tires at a local bike shop. And so I will give a shout out to Blue Ridge Cyclery at I think it's Libby Mill, I think is the name of it here in Richmond. Fantastic organization, fantastic business, awesome customer service. I bought the tires thinking I'll just install them myself because I can install tires. So I know how to do that. But I got those things home and I could not get them installed. It was a struggle. I had blisters on the tops of my fingers from trying to get the tire on the rim. Wow. And so I went back the next day and I said, please install these. I'll pay the $40 per tire, whatever. Just install them, please. And so, yeah, was $20 per tire. So $40 in general, so in total, but it was well worth it. So because of the wet conditions, and I only did kind of like a short gear check ride the day before outside. So I wasn't quite sure kind of like how these tires were going to be gripping because they were so new. And so I do feel like I was a little bit conservative and not riding kind of like as far to the right, like in the bike lane, because when you start and have all these wet conditions, stuff gets washed into that lane. And so you can have a lot of debris and rocks and all kinds of just junk. And so I kind of stayed on just to the left side of the white line. But I was still far enough over, but not in the bike lane. I did not want to ride through that because I saw a number of people with their day ended walking their bikes back because of flat tires. Ooh, and so I knew that is a possibility. So I stayed a little bit to the left of that white line. You don't want to ride on the white line because that's super slick. You ride just to the left of it, still staying on the asphalt. But
can I ask you a question, like about the tires? Yeah. Just like you know how you're not supposed to like run with a brand new pair of shoes? Like how is that like with the triathlon? Like I don't know. Like I suppose there's a little bit of risk there.
It's probably something that right.
I don't know. I'm not saying calling
it's
you that.
probably something that I shouldn't have done. I know. Yeah.
Sometimes we do it.
Never
right?
do anything new. Yeah. But
it happens.
I had actually
worked out. But
I've used these tires before.
Right.
And so I kind of know how they handle. But I think when I had them the last time, I had a different set of rims. Now I have like a set of like carbon rims, which are very different than kind of like the stock metal rims, that aluminum rims that you would have. And so they sit differently, and they just fit onto the rim. And so the bike mechanic was like, yeah, these tires just fit. So you might want to be a little bit more conservative. But I was willing to gamble with it and just roll with it. If I had gotten a flat tire, if I had gotten a flat on the race course, I would have been really screwed.
Sometimes when we have
things,
a lot of
yeah.
experience, like we kind of know what we can. You're kind
Yeah,
of like,
I know where I can push it. I'm
Yeah.
not going to change my bike fit and like change the position of my seat or anything like that. So I was like, tires, if I have to be a little bit more conservative in terms of like my cornering and things like that, and taking a corner too sharp, that's a willing sacrifice that I could make.
Makes sense. Yeah.
I had a fantastic bike though. I mean, it was I beat my goal handily. And so my power was great. My speed was great. There was a segment of the road that was really rough and just kind of beat you to death a little bit, but it was a fairly small segment of the road. But once you got past that, it was smooth sailing.
Nice.
I kind of went in with an established nutrition plan on like when I was going to consume stuff. Usually I just kind of like have like an idea on when I'm going to eat things, but this one I was really structured with it, and I said, okay, I'm going to take a UCAN gel 15 to 20 minutes before the swim, but then the swim was shortened, but I still kind of took in the UCAN. So I was like, well, because I swam only half as long as I thought, do I need to adjust my nutrition plan? And I said, I don't think so. So I ended up taking in another UCAN gel right around the 15-minute mark into the bike, and then a second one right around the 60-minute mark. And then I had a bottle of Scratch with pre-workout in it. And so my bottles had that caffeine. I train with it. I know that my body uses it and handles it well. And so I wanted it. And so my bottle was a mix of Scratch and pre-workout. So I had the caffeine. And so it worked great. I couldn't have asked for a better bike. Came into transition. I was a little apprehensive on kind of like how things were going to go. And I structured my transition to cover up my shoes so that they didn't get super wet from the rain. So I have a run vest that I was going to use. I debated whether to take it, but I was like, I want my nutrition with me because I expect this run to be more than an hour. And I know that I want the electrolytes because it's going to be hot and humid and sticky. And so I want to keep up on that and not just rely on what I used on the bike. And I want to keep fueling the caffeine monster. And so, I had the same bottle, the same mix I had in a little collapsible flask that I keep in my run vest. So I put the run vest over the shoes, which kind of blocked them from getting any water in them. Some of my teammates.
Go ahead. One question I have with that, or one thing I just wanted to mention is I think that's always the thing to think about with the run, or, a lot of people don't like to carry things, but if you carry it on you, you have a lot more control, right? Like you had the control of having all those things you needed versus having to figure out how to rely on it on the course. So I know there's an extra weight or extra piece there, but I think for a lot of runners, even in a triathlon, to consider carrying something with you so you have the nutrition you need. Otherwise, you have to rely on what's on the course or taking, gels and stuff with you. So I think, I think the benefit it doesn't slow you down that much, and there's probably a lot of benefit to doing that. So
yeah,
I would agree. That's probably a good call. I just want to mention that.
No, I train like that. So all of my long runs have been with this vest. Once it kind of got past the winter, because I didn't do it during the wintertime. But once spring kind of hit, then I said I need to get used to running with this vest on and consuming electrolytes and consuming this fluid while I'm running. Uh, taking the flask in and out of the vest. I need to become more comfortable with that. And so, since I trained with it, I said I'm just going to take it. The worst thing that can happen is that I'll take a sip of it. It won't sit very well, and then I know all I got to do is just dump the fluid out, so I'm not carrying the extra weight, and then just stuff the flask back in, which I've done that in a race before, where I took one sip of the flask and I knew that it just did not feel well, and I was like, well, I'm not carrying this extra weight, so I just dumped it. But I'm glad I had it, and I had a little gel that was stuffed in my vest because I knew that right around mile 3, I was going to take in another gel, and so that I can get kind of closer to I think it was the 60 carbs an hour. I think I was still just shy of that, but that was my goal was to get closer to that. So this is kind of where things got interesting. was on the run. It started out great, and I think before I did the race, we released the roll of the brick workout, which is that bike and run workout. So I was using the mantras that I talked about in that podcast. Just be patient, relax, settle into it. Just kind of like settle into the run. Don't worry about pace. I didn't even look at my watch until I think it like buzzed for the first mile, and I was like, oh, okay, well that's decent. Then I got to about mile 3, and I was like, oh, I have to use the restroom. And so luckily it was I just had to pee, and I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to sit there and spend all this energy and focus trying to hold it. So I was like, and part of this course is through the woods. And so it's nice. It's like on crushed rock and stuff like that. So it's not just like open, and on the roadway. So I just nipped into the woods and did what I needed to do. It only cost me a minute. And so that was fine. And just started running again. And then I felt more discomfort, and I was like, oh, this isn't good. And this is more than just I need to stop for a minute. And this was more of an emergency kind of thing. So I said, well, I got to do this. And so I walked further back into the woods, and that stop cost me 3 minutes. So in total, I've now lost 4 minutes of my run standing still. What I'm thinking is my normal routine for a race is I take a laxative the night before, and I didn't take as many as I usually do, so I went a little bit easier on it. But what I'm thinking is that the fuel that I was trying to take in, I still had some of the processing going, like the laxative I feel was like probably still in my system. So stuff that I'm still taking in, it kind of like hit that and just wanted to get rid of it. So I'm going to the drawing board, and
Yeah.
I'm going to try a different approach, because my idea was like I want to be as light as possible, and I would just want to empty. I want to be completely empty and not worry about it.
Yeah.
So
I
what
mean,
I'm
I think,
thinking now is like, maybe I should reverse this and try and empty myself before the race, and then take something like an Imodium, which would kind of like, for lack of better description, like clog things up a little bit. That way I can take in fuel during the race more efficiently and not have my body trying to get rid of it, because I
right.
still have these chemicals running through my body to empty. So
Yeah,
I'm
I
going to
feel
try
like,
that.
yeah, that and just making sure you are absolutely practicing that fueling. Sorry, there's a storm, so there's thunder in the
Yep.
background. So absolutely practicing the fueling as much as you can before, like, your strategy. Like, I know you were doing that somewhat, but I think that's something we were talking about is like, okay, maybe we really need to, because I think that, and also, I think there's probably some risks to doing a laxative before. Just,
Mm.
potentially, especially with the hydration piece, and just making sure you're not totally depleting yourself. So I think also just really thinking those several days before, like I was saying, like I don't think you did a ton of veggies, but just being really careful about fiber intake leading into it, and then just really practicing, because I think it's like that training your gut thing is so important, because if you're not used to, even if you're taking in fuel, if you do decide to take in more than you usually do, it could have backfire on you with the bathroom break. But if you're kind of training your gut to get used to that, that's probably part of it, maybe. So I think it's just a little bit of experimentation when you do sort of get back into training, is like around that, and figuring out how to both train the gut, but also like whatever strategy, trying to do that. I don't know. I mean, if it works for you to do the laxative, I think there's just some concerns I would have with that. I think maybe Imodium.
I don't think it's working, because I've had a couple races where I've had some GI issues.
Yeah, I wonder
just
if it would
the
almost
inability
make
to
it
take in
worse, because now you sort of depleted and almost can have a disruption on your gut microbiome a little bit. So then maybe you're going into it like, I'd be worried that would make it worse, because then when you did take in stuff that morning of and during, it might backfire on you, because you've had some disruption there. So yeah, I mean, something to work right. There's always something to work on. something to experiment with. That's part of it, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so
because of my
Oh, what time? What point was it? Mile 3 or mile 4?
It was about halfway. It was like mile 3, so it's like almost like right in the middle of the 10K run for the race. So that was a bit unfortunate, and I started thinking, I was like, well, I've now lost 4 minutes on my run. I don't think I have a shot at a podium spot, and so I was like, you know what? But I'm still going to run my race. I'm going to go as well as I can go, and still execute my plan, even though that I kind of thought that I was kind of like out of contention. But I did make an adjustment to my nutrition plan. I did not take in that last gel. I just stuck with the fluids, and I think that was the right decision. So I ended up finishing the race, bringing in like 50 grams of carbs per hour, and so my replacement rate, I think, wound up being about 24%. So the calories that I burned versus the calories that I took in, I replaced about 24% during the race. So that's not too bad, given that it's a fairly shorter race and the higher intensity that you're racing at. So I think overall my nutrition strategy was a success, but I just had to make that slight adjustment during it. So I'm kind of scrolling down here now. I finished the run in good form. My Achilles were barking at me like around like mile 4.5 to 5. Just in like one foot is kind of worse than the other, and so I could tell by the video that I saw, that my wife, shot of me finishing. I could tell that my gait was off, and I was favoring that one foot. It was all lopsided and it didn't look good, but it served its purpose, and I finished. I didn't have the pace that I would have liked. I think even if I add in maybe the 4 minutes that I lost, it might have brought me up to kind of like right around what I call like my level 1 or like my level 3 goal, is kind of like my baseline. This is what I know that I can do. So I ended up finishing with like a 12:14 pace, which is, for me, that's not too bad. I kind of like, my minimum was like a 12-minute pace, and I'm like around like anywhere between 11 and 12 for that distance, because I've had issues with my Achilles, and I've actually had some nerve issues in my shoulders, and one of my shoulders, so it kind of affects my arm swing, and that directly affects my gait. So this was kind of what I knew kind of going into it. But I had no issues with my shoulders. The feet are what they are. But I did switch up some shoes. Normally, I've been running in shoes that have a larger heel to toe drop. So it's right around like, I think it's like a 10 to 12. So I was running in a Brooks, Ghost Max, in order to give me a little bit more cushion in my heels. But this is my second pair of shoes, and it feels like it's kind of like been getting worse. So I'm starting to wonder, it's like, okay, well, maybe these larger heel toe drop shoes aren't, and is not what I really need, because I don't really find myself as a heel striker. I'm more of that midfoot. And so I think that it just wasn't working for me. So I was like, well, let me just go back to a lower heel toe drop, like a right around that 4 millimeter drop, which is like right around where the Hokas are, which is where I normally run in. But I switched it up even more and went to Ultras. Ultra is now making a non-zero drop road shoe. I have their trail version of it. Yeah, I have their trail version of it, and I love the shoe. It's got a wide toe box, and so I really like the shoe. And so I said, like 2 weeks before the race, I ordered another pair of the road version of their shoes, and said, let me just break these in and let's see how it goes. And my feet felt so much better in those shoes versus in the Brooks. And so that's what I went with race day. And I think it was a good decision. And I think I'm going to stick with it. Maybe I'm going to rotate these two pairs of shoes in and out. I know with the lower heel toe drop, you have different calf engagement. And so, kind of mixing things up and how that calf gets engaged might be better for me, because if you're running in the same shoe, all your runs, the same muscles are being engaged and being worked. And so, that can lead to some types of overuse injuries as if you're running in the same type of shoe. So if you have, maybe a larger heel toe like a Brooks, and then you do some of your runs and something a little bit lower, then it's mixing up how your foot is contacting with the ground and how the muscles are being engaged as you rock through that foot strike. And so that's kind of what I'm going to experiment with as I go into half marathon training, is kind of rotating these shoes in and out and see if it'll help.
I do that. I have the Ultras where I use those for kind of my longer runs, and then I have more cushiony shoes that I sometimes use, or even like the super shoes I found, like an slightly older pair of the carbon plated, like cushy, like foam with all the foam. I wear it even sometimes during my easy runs, because it actually is less like it. I don't know, like it's almost like it takes some of the pressure off, or like it helps me recover a little bit better, I think. And then I have shoes that I sometimes wear during like workouts that are a little lighter, more minimal, that I feel faster in. So I have, when I'm really training, I'll have like 3, sometimes 4 pairs of shoes that I'm kind of rotating around in. That seems like a lot. You don't have to do that many, but I think that's a great strategy personally. So just wanted to put my thoughts in there.
So that's what I'm going to test out over the remainder of my training season. And when I go into strictly run training, I am taking a bit of a break from the run, just because I need these Achilles to kind of repair themselves and minimize the damage to it, so that when I go into half marathon training, I can train like I want. And so overall, I finished the race with a 2:47:59, so it's just shy of the 2:58. My goal for the race was to finish like my A goal, like my rock star day goal would have been 3 hours. So technically I beat that, but I only had half the swim that I was going to have. And so if I double my swim, which is it took me 15 minutes to do the swim. So if I say, well, if I add another 15 minutes, then it would put me over the 3-hour mark. So it wasn't a PR, but I finished the bike with uh, an awesome bike. I was in like zone 4 in terms of power. My cadence was right around like 86 RPMs, which is solid. I've done a lot of cadence work to try and bring that cadence up so I can spin at a faster rate. I finished at 21 and a half miles an hour on the bike, which is solid given that I ride a road bike. I'm not riding a TT bike, which is different geometry, which you can a lot easier generate that kind of speed. So if I'm on a road bike with clip-on aero bars, and I'm still generating that kind of speed and feel great coming off the bike, then I'm really happy with my bike fitness. It goes to show that I have really, really deep bike fitness. Still a lot of work to do, but I'm happy with it. So let's see. I'm looking through here. So I finished the race, and I was like, hey, it wasn't the race that I kind of like envisioned in my head. I'll put it that way. It's like when I clicked the register button, this was kind of like my how I dreamed the race would go. My training would be smooth, and I would have no issues to deal with. My shoulders would hold up. My feet were great. I'd run with fantastic form, and I would have an amazing bike. Did it all pan out that way? No, it didn't. And I don't think any of us, if you have a race like that, then consider yourself extremely blessed. And it's probably the one race that you get where everything clicks off. The training went perfect. Race day went perfect. You executed your nutrition strategy, perfectly. It does not happen often. And so as I was like, I saw my wife and I met my wife, and my mom was there, which was really nice to have my mom there. Both of my kids were there. So my son drove in from where, he lives outside of Harrisonburg, and he drove in. So I felt really, really blessed to have, both of my kids there, my wife and my mom racing in my hometown. It felt incredible. And so I was telling him, I was like, this is kind of what happened on the run. So I don't think I'm in contention for it. So I was like, let's just bring up the leaderboard and kind of see where the results are. And lo and behold, I performed well enough to get second place in my division. I race in the Clydesdale division. So it's for those of you that don't know the divisions, you have the Athena division, and then you have the Clydesdale division. So for the Clydesdales, it's a weight of 220 pounds or more. So there's a mix of ages, but we're all, heavier. We're all supposed to be heavier than that weight. There's no weigh in. So I think they just kind of like take you at your word. And so, I definitely definitely meet that criteria. So I finished second. And so I was extremely humbled and thankful that, even though I didn't necessarily have the race that I had hoped that I would have, I still had one of the best years of triathlon racing I've had in the past 10 years of doing this. And to know the struggles that I've had with my swim, as I've kind of like had to rebuild my swim from all the surgeries and the damage that I've done to my shoulders and the issues that I've had to deal with, it wasn't that long ago where I couldn't lift one of my arms above my head. And, I was first out of the water in my division. And so, I'm exceptionally humbled by that. And that, that God continues to bless me with the ability and the desire to do this. And, not only to come out of the water first, but also to come off the bike in first place as well. So the run is kind of where I kind of tumbled down a little bit. And I came in fourth on the run. There was only 5 of us in the division, and 1 was a DNF. So technically, I guess I kind of finished last on the run, but my performance overall was well enough for good enough for second place. My run has always kind of been a weak spot in mine, but my bike and swim training has been spot on. And coming in that position on the day it'd
be nice if you could get your Achilles things stuff figured
If
out.
if I can just sort this run out and be able to run in a way during training that allows me to train like I want to train, so that I feel more prepared on race day, then I would be firing on all cylinders. So, but I knew going into that my run is my weakest, and it's where I can't train like I really want to because I have these issues. And they're chronic. So my goal then is to become the best cyclist that I can possibly become, and try and bank as much fitness there, because I know that if I can come off the bike feeling as fresh as possible, then it sets me up for a good run or a decent run. And so that's how I've trained. And I've with my shoulder issues, I've just been trying to just rebuild my swim. I've had to change my swim stroke a little bit because of limited mobility, but it's been good enough to come in like first and second out of the water in the last 2 races. So out of the 3 races that I've done this year in triathlon, the first one I had a massive PR. The second one, both the second and third one, I placed second in my division. So, I haven't had performance like this before, and I'm extremely thankful that God continues to bless me and allow me to do this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I think like yours,
overall, it's
it's like
fantastic.
the opposite for me with the triathlon. I was always just hanging on in the swim. I was just never a great swimmer as hard as I tried. I'm sure I could really work on it and make it better, but I was always a decent cyclist, and then I would get onto the the run portion of the course and I was like shine, right? It would be like,
Yeah.
I love that about triathlon because I'd always be passing so many people. It made me feel so good about, but it was like, I feel like if I had just gotten better at the swim and maybe slightly better at the bike, I could be really good, because then I wouldn't have to start so far back on the run trying to like catch up. So it's like comes like the opposite, like it's just interesting how our strengths, and what we're strong at, and it's a little different for everyone. And then with the triathlon, if you have somebody that's obviously good at all 3, they're probably a professional or something. But
Yeah, those are the rarities.
the rare,
So even the elites that I know, they do have, they tend to have like one of the disciplines is their weaker one. And so as I've said before,
their weak one is still faster.
yeah, it just happens to be a lot faster than the rest of us.
Yeah.
But I think that looking back, my training plan, the training plan that I developed for this season worked well. It did what I wanted it to do, and that was to give me really, really deep bike fitness, give me good swim fitness to where I didn't get out of the water feeling exhausted, even though I can't swim as hard as I know I can, and as fast as I can, or as fast as I used to be able to swim. But I am coming out of the water feeling fairly fresh, and then I come off the bike feeling even fresher. So it's like I'm able to like stock up, while I'm on the bike. And so my training plan has been spot on. The run is what it is, but I know that as I continue to focus on strength and shedding some of the extra weight that I've been carrying around, I know that the run will come, and the speed will come as I move forward. But the strength work that I've done over the past year has been is paying dividends now, and it's proved to me, how important the strength side is to endurance sports. Even though we spend so much time, swimming, running, cycling, and all this, we're trying to fit all these disciplines in. That fourth one, if your muscular system can't hold up to the aerobic side that you're trying to stack on top of it, that's why you're going to continue to get hurt. And I lived that, so I know exactly what that means. And so it's paying dividends. Is it a sacrifice? Yes. Can I swim, bike, and run as much as I want to? No, because I know that there's an importance to that other aspect until I get to the point where it's like, okay, now I feel strong, so I don't have to do it as much. I still do a little bit, but I don't have to do as much as I have been doing. And so it's paying dividends. And
Right.
completely worth
Yeah,
it.
I think the strength training, I mean, that's almost like another thing we could talk about is the benefits of that for endurance athletes. But that's been, I've had this 30-year, I guess, career. I don't know what you call it because I'm making a lot of money doing it, but
Yeah.
it's like I've had this 30 years of running, and I'm still like at 42, like running obviously pretty strong if I can do the same time from 15 years ago. But I think the biggest thing that has made the difference for me is that strength training component, which I actually started adding in more about the time I was in my early 30s. But that I don't think I would be where I am today if I wasn't doing that. I don't think so. I would be injured. I would. There's no way. So I think especially for anybody, for any athlete, really, even in their 20s, it's important. But when you get to the point where you're in your 30s and 40s, I think it's like a non-negotiable. Like if you
Yeah.
don't, if you think you don't have time for it, you're going to be in trouble. That's probably what has helped with my longevity in this sport more than anything else.
Right.
And I do believe full-heartedly in that. Like I don't question that. I'm like very, very certain of it. So I do think, it's something we should maybe talk about sometime, even having a full episode on just that strength training and kind of the
Yeah.
benefits and how we go about it and things like that. But yeah, like I would agree. Well, I think yeah, I mean, I think do you have anything else? I mean, I feel like we did a really good job of covering our our races. I'm trying to think if I have any other last minute thoughts or anything about
Yeah.
the
I
race.
can't think of anything.
Yeah.
I know this past week has been so I'll quickly talk about how my recovery week has gone. Um, I was super excited because now that and I was like, well, I didn't get my 1500 swim. So do I need to go find another Olympic to do in order to really get it? And I told myself I'm not looking at any races for at least a week. And then within that week and in conversations with you, I told myself, I was like, well, I could sign up for another Olympic race and then have the exact same thing happen. They have to shorten the swim or swim gets canceled altogether. And then I'm constantly trying to chase that distance. And rather than just say, that's what, those were the cards that I had to deal with. This is like my ninth Olympic. So it's not like I haven't done it before. So it'd be different if I was like a one and done kind of athlete and it's just like, oh, I really want to do it. And you didn't really get the opportunity to, which I totally get. But rather than trying to chase this distance, I said, I'm not going to sign up for another one for that purpose. Now, because I've had some good performance, I was like, well, maybe I want to keep this momentum. So let me sign up for a few more races and see, if I can, keep this track going. And the conversation that I had with you was extremely important and helpful, and saying, that's really short-sighted. Yeah, you can keep momentum going now, but what's it going to cost you, you know, for next season? Rather say stick to your plan. You did the races that you wanted to do and that you said that you were going to do. You performed well. Now stick with your plan. Focus on, reducing a little bit of volume. Focus on shedding a few more of the weight for a few more of the pounds, stack on some more muscle so that you can come back stronger, faster, leaner in the future. And that performance will come. And I think that was so important, and
Right.
something that you and I are self coach, but
Right.
we're coaches, but we're still self coach. So
Yeah.
we really don't have anybody to bounce these ideas and these thoughts off of. If you have a coach, then that is one of the greatest things of having a coach, is that you
Mhm.
got that unbiased, that un I don't want to say not that non-emotional
Mhm.
person to talk to and say, hey, this is kind of what I'm thinking. You can use them to talk you off the ledge. But we don't have that, and self-coached athletes don't have that either. And it's one thing that I struggled early in my kind of like triathlon journey was like chasing performance. Oh, I didn't perform as well as I wanted to, so let me find another race to validate what I think that I can do, rather than just letting it happen.
Right.
And so
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
that
a
was
lot of
really important.
struggle. Yeah, I think a lot of athletes struggle with that, like kind of like, oh, I want to keep the momentum going. I'm doing,
Yep.
especially. I mean, I think that's universal. So many people want to just kind of sign up for the next one. Let me just keep going instead of
Yeah.
focusing on that recovery piece and then kind of working on weaknesses in a way, or just allowing the body to, or just pulling back a little bit so that when you do sort of sign up, you're not going to burn out, because I think that is also a problem. And I know I struggled with that. Like, it's hard. I kind of did that, like with the, doing that Tucson marathon 6 weeks after New York City, and then kind of signing up for this one. I know I had a bigger gap, but it's a lot. Like, you can only do that for so long, especially in certain races, especially in the marathon, before it's like you're putting your body through so much that you're either risking, like maybe not being able to continue years down the road, or you just burn yourself out completely and it takes like 3 years. Because I've kind of been there before, where I had to take some time off because I had done so much and pushed my body so hard. It was like, I'm done. I don't even have the desire to train. And that's not a great place to be either. So I think, that's something I've had to really think about. And I almost feel now like a little sigh of like relief. Like, I won't be doing another marathon this year. I probably won't do one. If I do one, it won't be until next year. And I'm focusing on strength and speed, and just working on like how fast can I run a mile? Like, I'm not a mile runner, so this can be fun, right? Or 5K, and just those short distances, speedy stuff. And it's just totally different than marathon training. And it's a nice sort of time to work on some of the, I'm not saying it's like a weakness, it's just not my strength, right? I'm more of an endurance person. So it's kind of fun and it's interesting, and it shakes it up and makes it different. And so I think that's important, to do that, and to take that step back and allow your body to even have like a little bit of time where you reduce the training volume, so that when you're ready to get into it again, you're ready and you're strong, and you've taken care of those things you need to take care of, and you can jump back into it full 100%, and that's, I think, important. And I think that's something I've had, I'm also kind of there with you in that, like, I need to not signing up for another marathon anytime soon. So yeah.
So what I did was I took the pedals off of my road bike. And so now I've stuffed my road bike in the shed, and I'm said, I'm done. I'm putting this aside right now. And I put my pedals on my gravel bike.
Right.
And so all last week I was out riding the gravel bike and had a blast doing it. I am super sore from it. It is a different style of riding and different demands. And I don't know why I thought, this is a bit of recovery week, so I'll just ride the gravel bike. No, it's an hour and a half on the gravel bike is not the same as an hour and a half on the road bike. It is a lot more demanding, especially when you're not used to riding it. But I've been super excited to try and get back on my gravel bike and get off the road.
It gives you something,
have some fun.
Different, something different. Like, I think that's so important. So it sounds like we're kind of both on the same page a little bit with like our not different goals, but like different things we're working on, but like similar kind of.
I think our approach is similar. I mean, it's like we're both done with our races. And so now it's just like, now we get to kind of do stuff that we don't normally do, or stuff that we've sacrificed. And now we can kind of get back to, that's kind of one of the benefits of, kind of finishing off that race. And
and you're done. You
it
always
makes the sacrifice worth it.
Better, but you can't just, that doesn't mean you can sign up for another one and expect, I mean, it's almost like that. Sometimes it gets to that point where it's like that definition of insanity, right? You just keep doing it over and over again and thinking the results will be different. And, if you're not taking the time to, do what we've discussed, like, I think that can backfire. So I think we've left it at a good place. Like, I think that's a good ending point for where we're at now. And what are we going to talk? We were talking, we have in 2 weeks, we're doing an episode, which is also a good timing, is on heat, a little bit more about how we approach heat training, heat, like running in the heat, how to approach that, lightning. So that'll be fun, an interesting topic. So
so racing and training in the heat, it is a nuance that you have to account for, and how to adjust your performance expectations when the environment isn't conducive for PRs. So that's something that I know a lot of runners and triathletes, kind of suffer from, where this, like, they see great performance in the wintertime and they're like, oh, I'm getting unfit, as they get into the summer. But I think that this is a valid topic given the time of year that we're in. So the date that we're recording this is June 17th, 2025. And so now we're getting into the thick of it. The humidity is starting to come out. If you're in those parts of the country that suffer from it, I know I am, and it is a suffer fest going on right now. So it is a relevant and timely topic. But this one has been episode 10. So we are now officially in double digits. So congratulations, Katie, for our 10th birthday. Our podcast.
Hopefully we'll
our 10th episode. So absolutely. So thank you guys for listening. And this has been our race recap episode, where Katie talked about the Vermont City Marathon and I talked about the Jamestown Olympic Triathlon. Again, it was episode 10 of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. As a closing note, we do have the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast group, which is a closed group on Facebook. Please go out, and if you're listening to this podcast, please go out and join the group. All you do is you just answer one simple question, and we'll let you right on in. We're trying to build a community that is tied to the podcast, and I think it's a great place for listeners and for us to all learn from each other, communicate back and forth. We'll be putting out some additional content that'll be put out there. It's also a great place to float topics that you would like for us to cover on the podcast, and different Q&A sessions possibly in the future. So please go out and check us out in the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast group. Make sure that you have the group at the end of that. Otherwise, you're just on the official Facebook page for the podcast. So again, thank you guys for listening. We appreciate your attention, and we will see you again next time where we talk about heat training. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks, Katie. Talk to you later. Listening to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. Like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. Feel free to leave us up to a 5-star review on iTunes and Spotify, because leaving a review really helps others like you find us. Visit the podcast website for other episodes of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast at enduranceathletejourney.buzzsprout.com. Have questions or comments about the podcast? Send Coach Justin and Katie an email at theenduranceathletejourney@gmail.com. For all things coaching, visit Coach Katie at fuel2run.com and Coach Justin at tabularasaracing.com. Again, thank you for listening to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast, and remember to find joy in the journey.